The Ashcraft-Oft family's monthly dinners had always been less about cuisine and more about flaunting wealth. That evening, on the vast estate nestled on the outskirts of Napa Valley, all signs pointed to an especially unbearable gathering. I took my usual seat near the fireplace, quietly observing as my cousins competed to see who could boast the loudest. "I just bought a ranch in Jackson Hole," Preston said with exaggerated importance, swirling his wineglass, "right next to the guy who owns half of Silicon Valley." "Oh, please," Cassandra retorted, opening her designer purse with a dramatic flourish. "We just closed on a vineyard in Tuscany, private access to the Mediterranean. You can't even put a price on that kind of view." I hid a smile behind my glass of iced tea. "If only they knew, Nora." Aunt Evelyn's voice cut across the table abruptly. "You've been awfully quiet." Preston leaned in, feigning concern. "We were just talking about your current housing situation." And there it was, the comment I had expected. "What about it?" I replied, setting my glass down. "That tiny duplex in Portland," he said. "Still renting, aren't you?" Cassandra added, eyes wide with disbelief. I didn't know people our age still rented. I nearly laughed. The Alder Street building was, in fact, the first commercial property acquired by my company through West Pine Holdings. To them, I was just a struggling tenant. The truth, I was the owner. "I liked the place," I replied calmly. "You're 35, dear," Evelyn commented with a patronizing smile. "It's time to grow up. Buy something real." "Something real? How about a $1.8 billion real estate portfolio, residential complexes, commercial towers, and yes, the Ashcraft-Oft Plaza, the very property they'd been using for their monthly events for almost a year. I had quietly acquired it through a private equity firm that couldn't be traced back to me. "I made a good deal," I replied simply. Preston gave a mocking grin. "You can't even afford a mortgage." I leaned back in my chair and let them continue, knowing that soon the lease renewal contracts would land on their desks, bearing my name on the letterhead. Dad finally looked up from his wineglass. Now, Preston. Not everyone has your sharp instincts. Nora made her choices." Aunt Evelyn sighed, as though disappointed that I hadn't married a hedge fund manager or become a lifestyle blogger. They assumed I spent my days showing crumbling walk-ups to broke grad students, scraping by on commission checks. What they didn't know was that Nora Hale, the so-called family underachiever, was also West Pine Holdings, the anonymous firm that had been quietly acquiring residential and commercial real estate across the Pacific Northwest for the past 10 years. "Speaking of real estate," Cassandra interjected, her eyes gleaming, "did you hear what happened on Alder Street? Some company bought the entire block." "They're tearing it all down," she added with mock sympathy. "I guess that little apartment of yours is finally going." I kept my expression neutral. I was the buyer, and I had no intention of tearing anything down. The Alder Street complex was a hidden gem: brick facades, vintage architectural details, and rent protections for families who had lived there for generations. I was overseeing a historically respectful renovation. "Really?" I asked. "I hadn't heard." "Of course not," Preston sneered. "Deals of that size are way out of your league." "If you get evicted," Evelyn said brightly, "you can always move back into the guest house. We'll help you find something more respectable, maybe even someone respectable." "I'm happy," I said flatly, "and so is my landlord." Cassandra let out a tight laugh. "You can't live a small life forever, dear. Hale used to mean something in this state." It still did, just not in the way they imagined. In the real estate world, West Pine was synonymous with ethical growth and tenant-first investments. The complete opposite of my cousins' flashy developments that bulldozed communities just to feed their egos. "Actually," my father said, setting his wineglass down, "this meeting has a business angle too. The board is concerned about the new owner of Ashcraft-Oft Plaza." I tilted my head slightly. "West Pine Holdings acquired a majority stake 6 months ago," he said. "No one knows who they are, possibly a foreign investor." Preston nodded. Has to be. These tycoons love legacy properties. If only they knew the mysterious investor they feared was sitting right there, in a thrift store cardigan and worn-out boots. And now, my father continued, they're asking difficult questions, especially about, let's say, creative accounting, like Preston using the building fund to finance his trip to Jackson Hole, or Cassandra labeling her designer handbags as client engagement expenses. I'm sure it's nothing serious, Aunt Evelyn said, nervously fingering her pearl necklace. The Hale name still carries weight. That's exactly the problem, my father interrupted. Whoever's behind Westbine doesn't seem impressed by names. They've ordered a full audit. I watched as their expressions shifted. Panic, carefully masked behind designer smiles. An audit would expose far more than questionable spending. It would unravel the entire game. Maybe Nora can help, Cassandra suggested suddenly, her tone dripping with sugar. She works in real estate, doesn't she? Might know someone at the management firm. They all turned to me at once. In an instant, I went from being the family embarrassment to a potential asset. I mostly deal with small residential clients, I replied smoothly. Nothing on the scale of Ashcraft Plaza. For God's sake, Preston scoffed. You can't even help your own family. My mother gave him a warning glance, but her silence spoke volumes. Even my father was back to scrolling through his phone, disinterested. They had no idea just how helpful I was about to be, just not in the way they expected. The following morning, Westpine Holdings would release an official statement. Immediate operational reforms at Ashcraft Plaza. No more shadow budgets, no more nepotistic contracts, no more treating the building like the family's private credit card. I looked around the penthouse, paintings bought with maintenance funds, sofas priced 3 times higher than their value, fixtures installed by Cassandra's husband's company with bloated invoices. Anyway, I said, rising and brushing off my jeans, some of us have early mornings. Off to show more rent-controlled studios, Cassandra mocked. I slung my worn leather bag over my shoulder. Inside were legal briefings and renovation proposals worth more than everything in that room. Nora, Aunt Evelyn called sweetly, next time try dressing more like a Hale. Appearances matter. I smiled. Don't worry, I said. Tomorrow I'll look exactly like a Hale should. They just haven't realised I'm the one running the show. If you've quietly rooted for Nora all along, don't miss what happens when the boardroom doors open. Subscribe to the channel to be the first to see the family's reaction when they find out the nobody they dismissed now holds the keys to everything. The next morning, I stood in my real office, an entire penthouse floor overlooking downtown Portland, ready for the moment I'd spent over a year planning. My assistant, Illa, entered briskly, setting a cappuccino next to my laptop. The Ashcraft Plaza board is already seated, she said. Your family arrived early, trying to charm the independent members. I smirked at the thought of Preston and Cassandra desperately trying to sway the room. Audit packets are printed and distributed. The forensic team found more than we anticipated. She paused. Are you sure you want to do this? Once they know, there's no turning back. They need to learn, I said quietly, that legacy is no excuse for abuse of power. I turned to the glass, catching my reflection. The jeans and cardigan were gone. Today I wore a deep navy Altuzarra suit, sleek lines, quiet strength, the kind of outfit Aunt Evelyn once hoped I'd wear to meet a husband. Today, I'd wear it to dismantle their house of cards. The ownership announcement goes live in 20 minutes, Illa added. Once it hits, your identity will be revealed. Then let's begin, I said, picking up my briefcase. The Ashcraft Plaza boardroom fell silent when I entered. My family was huddled in a corner, visibly uneasy and woefully underdressed for the occasion. Who are you? Preston barked. This is a private meeting. I calmly placed my briefcase at the head of the table. I'm Nora Hale, I announced, founder and sole owner of West Pine Holdings, the company that owns this building and several others your family has misused. Evelyn went pale. Cassandra's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. My father's hands clenched around his pen. Nora, he whispered. I nodded. Good morning. I opened the briefcase and began sliding audit reports across the table. Shall we review your financials? This is insane, Preston stammered. You're just... What? I interrupted. The black sheep? The tenant? The woman in second-hand clothes? Cassandra blinked. But you show apartments. I work, I replied simply, and I built something real with integrity, not appearance. The board watched in stunned silence as the proud Hale family began to unravel, page by page. These files, I continued, contain detailed documentation of every misused fund, inflated invoice, and falsified receipt. I handed out the final set of documents. Preston, would you care to explain the $2 million in roof repairs that funded your Jackson Hole home? He flushed so hard I thought he might faint. Or you, Cassandra. I flipped to the next page. Would you like to explain your husband's invoices, charging triple market rate for basic plumbing? You'd air your own family's dirty laundry like this? Aunt Evelyn gasped. No, I said evenly. You aired it. I'm just making sure it gets cleaned. My father finally spoke, his voice low and pleading. Nora, sweetheart, we can explain. Don't, I said, raising a hand. I've spent years watching this family treat our great-grandfather's legacy like a personal ATM. While you mocked my so-called humble life, I was building something better, rooted in values, not vanity. But why? Cassandra asked, dazed. Why pretend you were struggling? I never pretended, I answered. I lived modestly. I made smart investments. You assumed wealth had to be loud. The Alder Street building, Preston muttered, stunned. You actually live there? I own it, I corrected, and most of the block. And no, I'm not demolishing anything, because some of us still care about people, not just profit. Suddenly, phones around the table buzzed. One of the board members looked up from their screen. West Pine Holdings reveals CEO identity, Nora Hale, estranged member of the Hale family, confirmed as owner of a $2 billion real estate portfolio. They looked at me, stunned. Ranked among the most ethical developers, they murmured. Historic preservation, tenant protections. This is going to ruin us, Cassandra whispered, pale. No, I stated firmly. This will save you. From yourselves. Starting today, Ashcroft Plaza will operate with full transparency. No more facades. No more privilege masquerading as tradition. What if we refuse? Preston tried to sound firm, but his voice wavered. He smiled. In that case, I'll send these documents to the proper authorities. I'm quite confident the IRS would find them enlightening. The silence grew heavier. What do you want? My father finally asked. I want you to remember what the name Hale used to stand for before all of this. I looked each of them in the eyes. My great-grandfather built communities, not just profits, I said, gathering my papers. You have a choice. Work with me to restore that legacy, I said calmly, or find somewhere else to live. I've heard there are some lovely rentals by Lake Otsego. I turned to leave. Nora, wait. My father's voice stopped me as I reached the door. I was wrong about you. Yes, I replied softly. You were. The consequences unfolded like something out of a corporate drama. The media was captivated by the hidden story of Portland, of someone quietly building a real estate empire and dismantling a family's illusion in a single board meeting. Aunt Evelyn stepped down from 3 local boards, too ashamed to show her face. Cassandra's husband's firm closed just weeks after the audit went public. But not everything ended bitterly. For the first time, facing the consequences of her actions, Cassandra enrolled in a real estate course at a public university and began volunteering at a downtown housing shelter. She told me later that it gave her more purpose than any gallery opening ever had. And my father asked to learn the business, not to regain control, but as a student. This time, he wanted to understand what I had built. 6 months later, I sat in my Alder Street apartment. Yes, I kept it. Reviewing new quarterly reports. Ashcraft Plaza was thriving. Leases were stable. Tenant satisfaction was up. And the small businesses on the ground floor were turning healthy profits. A knock on the door broke my focus. When I opened it, I found my mother. She was wearing jeans and no makeup. It took me a moment to register the casualness. "I got your invitation," she said, holding it up. "Courtyard holiday party?" I nodded. "Not exactly your scene." "No," she admitted, glancing around my modest space. "But I'm learning that maybe the scene isn't everything." She picked up a photo, me at 23, beaming at my real estate license ceremony. "I never asked," she said. "Why this path?" "Because I wanted to build something real," I answered, "not just buy and show off. And now," she murmured, "you control more than all of us combined." "I do," I nodded. "But control isn't the goal. Purpose is." She looked at me seriously. "Will you teach me?" "Come tonight," I invited. "Meet the families who have lived here for decades. Listen, that's where legacy begins." Later that night, I stood at my window watching the lights flicker across Portland. This city I had quietly made mine. Ashcraft Plaza glowed in the distance. No longer a monument to greed, but a symbol of rebuilding. Below, the Alder Street building moved with quiet life. Brick facades, original wood beams, and courtyard gardens carefully preserved. My phone buzzed with new messages, partnership proposals, speaking invitations, acquisition offers. Westpine Holdings was in high demand now, but I kept my schedule balanced, my routine grounded. To me, success wasn't about overshadowing the past. It was about creating something meaningful, something that would last. Sometimes the one they pity becomes the one they must learn from. And sometimes the best kind of triumph doesn't roar, it endures. A week later, at the Alder Street holiday party, I stood by the garden fountain, watching my family adjust to a world they once dismissed. My mother sat beside Mrs. Lopez, a tenant of 38 years, listening with genuine interest. Preston helped string lights with Mr. Keller, a World War II veteran and the building's longest resident. Cassandra laughed beside a table full of children decorating cookies. Slowly, they were learning. Real wealth isn't what you flaunt. It's what you preserve, what you share, what you uplift. My father approached as I poured myself a cup of hot cocoa. "You know," he said, "your great-grandfather believed buildings should shelter hearts, not just wallets." I nodded. I found his old ledgers, handwritten notes about protecting tenants. We forgot that. He looked at me, not as a daughter who'd gone off track, but as someone who had kept the flame he'd let die. "You could have ruined us." "That was never the point," I replied, watching a little girl twirl beneath the lights. I wanted to build something that would outlast me, and sometimes the greatest success isn't proving them wrong, it's offering a better version of what's right. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly dismissed, maybe you see a bit of yourself in me. I never set out to prove anything to anyone. I just wanted to build something real, something no one could take away, because it was rooted in values, not vanity. If my story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share in the comments. What would you have done in my place? What have you built in silence while others doubted you? Let's talk about it. Let's honor the quiet effort, the long nights, the tough decisions. And if you're facing a moment like I once did, when the world expects nothing from you, don't shout louder. Build stronger. You don't need approval to begin. You need purpose and consistency. The rest will follow. Support this journey by subscribing to the channel. There are more stories ahead about resilience, redemption, and redefining success on your own terms. Because legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you create. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who they said you'd never be. So subscribe, stay with me, and let's build something that lasts.